Hello and welcome back to the Wheel Knowers Formula One podcast. I'm Josh. I'm joined as always by Sam. Sam, how are we feeling? Are we fired up after the Chinese Grand Prix? Are we down in the dumps? How are you feeling after the race this weekend?
I'm fired up for our boy Kimi. It
Yeah.
was so exciting to see him get that first win. You kind of felt it coming with the car that Mercedes has, but
Mhm.
to see him up there on the top step, see him in tears in the post race interview,
Mhm.
that's what it's all about. So yeah, I'm pumped right now and excited to get into this race.
Yeah, it was kind of a matter of when, not if, for Kimi this year. It felt like with that Mercedes car behind him. Uh, as you mentioned, Kimi, first Grand Prix victory of his career. It was really nice to see all that emotion after the race. I mean, you just don't really see that a lot. I mean, after some of these, I don't blame him, but some of these Max wins back when he was just dominating some of even like George in Australia last week, he was happy, but it wasn't, the same kind of outpouring of emotion that we see when guys get their first win or a big win in their career or something. And yeah, so it was nice to see Kimi just letting it all out after the race. First Grand Prix victory of his career, like I mentioned, second youngest ever to win a race behind Max Verstappen. Just some crazy numbers there to be so young, 19 years old, and get your first victory in Formula One. Not many people have done that much already when they're 19. But Kimi is one of one. I think he's going to be really special.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot of pressure on his shoulders right now. First of all, being in the best car, being in the team that's expected to win the championship this year. And then he's also struggled, he struggled in Australia a little bit, had some, even though he ended up, P2 ended up with some rough moments there, bad start and everything.
Mhm.
And we saw that as well early on in China. It looked like maybe he was going to struggle based on the sprint, only
Mhm.
coming P5, nothing special there. But then he puts it on pole in qualifying, and he didn't start with the lead in terms of getting out of that first few corners, but being right there, P2, that's all he needed to do. Just keep the car clean, keep it safe, and let the rest take care of itself. So. Yeah, but a perfect execution late Saturday and Sunday from Kimi, and a really nice rebound when it would have been easy to kind of get in his own head there after a poor start to the season relatively.
Yeah, I was so impressed and taken away with how he drove on Sunday, especially. I mean, one of the things that I was really looking out for after his pole position was okay, how was he going to get off the line this time? Oh, in Australia, he really struggled, bogged down at the start. Same thing happened in the sprint on Saturday for Kimi. That's why he finished back in fifth. He started that sprint in second. So I was really looking to see how he would get off the line. He still lost the lead to the Ferraris, but George has lost the lead from pole in the sprint and the Australian Grand Prix as well. So that's more of a car thing than a Kimi thing. I think he nailed that start for what he needed to do, especially covering off George. He knew that was kind of going to be the real race was against his teammate George. And he made sure to cover him off. Just let the Ferraris do what they need to do, get their big start out of the way, and really cover off the guy that you have to. And that was George. Kimi did that just as he needed to do. It's not like it's the Lando Norris starts that we were talking about a couple years ago. This is more of a car thing for these Mercedes. I think he nailed the start for what he was capable of doing in that car.
Yeah, I don't mind a P2 start at all. In
Yeah.
in the sprint when he went down to P7 or so, that was a rough start.
Yeah.
Australia as well, but now coming back, P2 is not an issue. They can
Yeah.
manage well from there. That, like you said, that's just a car deal, and I'm wondering if we're going to kind of see that throughout, at least for the next month or two.
Mhm.
Granted, that's only about 3 races now, but until we get the Mercedes engine change and everything, I'm wondering if this is going to be the week to week
Mhm.
deal as the Ferraris qualify right behind the Mercedes, take the early lead, and then Mercedes with the race pace shows a different class. Because I mean, they ended up 25 seconds ahead, even with safety cars and with some Ferrari fighting in the first half of that race, where Ferrari looked like they could be competitive. So, I mean, when they get up in open air, there's no question who the fastest car is.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that a little bit later when we get to the Ferrari section, just how the race starts are unfolding for them and where they stack up against the Mercedes. But yeah, Kimi just, I mean, it was so impressive for him this week, especially on Sunday. I mean, it felt like he just controlled that race perfectly. Didn't really take any like unnecessary risks. Obviously, the only real slip up was that lockup with like 3 laps left. But these cars are pretty prone to locking up. It didn't really cost him that much time in terms of putting him on the back foot and losing a position or anything. Just a simple lockup got that out of his system. Other than that, I think it was honestly pretty much a perfect drive from Kimi. Cool, calm, collected, just all the words you could think of. And yeah, it's been a really good start to the season for him. At the end of last year, he was popping off as well. So I'm just really excited to see where we go from here for Kimi, because I think honestly, I mean, it's not breaking any news with this, but I think the sky's the limit for him. I think a lot of things that we were promised about him as kind of coming in as a prodigy and everything. I think a lot of those things are at least somewhat true, given the right car, and he has that car this year. So it'd be interesting to see how that unfolds as we go on. If that kind of turns into a title fight with George, or if he's kind of a clear second driver this year, but maybe get some more miles under his belt, gets some more lessons, and is able to fight him in a year or two for a championship.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that this guy's already progressed so much, Kimi skipping F3, only getting a little bit of F2 experience, and then coming in to F1. Yeah, he got beat pretty good by Russell last year, but Russell's one of the best drivers out there.
Yeah.
This guy, he's proven, like you said, second half of last year, he got a little better. And, he's going to be inconsistent. He's not going to be as consistent as Russell or the Ferrari guys, I think. But we're going to see flashes throughout the season that this guy really can be one of the best. And he's still got so much time at 19 years old. If he gets the opportunity, he's got so many chances to prove his worth and prove that he belongs up there with the top teams.
Yeah, do you think it changes anything like for this season? Do you think it's a signal that we could be on for a title fight between the two Mercedes guys, or do you think it's not quite that close yet? Because what we saw this week, yes, it was obviously very impressive from Kimi, but in the sprint race, George was out front. George has an issue in Q3 in qualifying. He doesn't really get a full run in that he would like to see. Still qualifies P2 though, behind Kimi, and ends up finishing P2 in the race after kind of a struggle of a race as well. In the beginning of that second stint, just wasn't really feeling the tires and the grip. Eventually it came to him though, and was able to pass the Ferraris and get second place again. But it took some outside forces of George kind of being on the back foot, starting in second, for Kimi to get this win. Do you think the title fight is on between those two, or do you think it's still a little too early to put Kimi up in that category with George yet?
I think it's just too early to make a call on that. I think, last year George had over double the points of Kimi. Was clearly the better driver with a couple of exceptions. So I think it's still too early to say that Kimi. He certainly has a chance at the title, but I think it's too early to say that it's a 2-horse race and that these two guys are going to be the dominant factors. I mean, first of all, I think George is still majority of weekends going to be ahead of Kimi. And then also you got the Ferrari guys back there. We'll see once the engine regs change kind of how that shifts. But for me, I still think it's a little bit early to go full on and say that these two guys are going to have a battle like we saw from Norris and Piastri last year. Max notwithstanding. Like, I think it's just a little bit too early for that, and there's a little bit too big of a consistency gap right now between the two drivers, even though we've seen that Kimi's best is up there with pretty much anyone.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kimi's definitely taken a step up this year compared to last year. I know it's only 2 races, but I feel like you could just kind of tell. Um, and yeah, it's something that we saw the past few years we talked about it with Lando a couple years ago. We talked about it with Oscar last year. When you're in your first real title fight, it's really hard to take that on and really challenge in the way that you need to for that, and have the experience to go off of. This is also going to be George's first real title fight, so I guess that kind of levels the playing field a little bit. But George will have more just Grand Prix experience to draw off of than Kimi will. So I still think Kimi would be a little bit on the back foot in that aspect of mindset for fighting for your first championship. But we gave, at least I did, gave Lando a little leeway in 24 when he was making some mistakes. I gave Oscar leeway last year when he was making some mistakes. And I feel like we might see kind of a similar thing from Kimi this year, where he's close, but just not quite close enough. And then in 2027, I think we'll be on for a real one. The only guy that we saw really be ready for his first title fight and take it on and win was Max Verstappen. And at that point, Max had already had much more experience just in racing than Kimi has had at this point. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different situation because he is so young. I don't think it's quite there yet. We were just giving him all of his flowers, and I think it's well deserved. But going up against a guy like George for an entire season, it's not taking anything away from Kimi to say that I don't think he's going to come out on top of that, but he could prove me wrong. And I honestly, I think he has the talent to prove me wrong in that. I'm just not sure that's how these things really work.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Max is the only one to kind of come in and do that and win recently. We also saw Lewis only lose out by 1 point in his rookie season, but it really takes like a generational driver to come in year one or year two and compete for titles. And Kimi could be that guy. I mean, he's even younger. I believe he's younger than Lewis was, and he's nearly as young as Max was. So at the end of the day, I mean, we're going to see if he's a generational talent. He could definitely compete. If he doesn't compete, though, that doesn't mean that he's not a great talent. It just means maybe he needs a little more polishing, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think he's going to certainly have his moments this year, even if I don't think he can stay with George for 22 races.
Well, I think he might be that generational talent. I just think, Max had a lot more time and a lot more experience under his belt, kind of similar to what we're going to see with George this year. George might have a little more time under his belt in F1 than Max did in 21, but it's pretty close between those two, where Kimi, this is his second year. He's 19 years old. I guess the only one you could compare that to, I guess, would be Lewis. I'm not sure his exact age when he was his rookie season, but he had to have been, pretty young. So it's kind of unprecedented just because of how young he is. And I think that's going to be something really interesting to keep an eye on as we go throughout the year. I think, these generational talents, like we mentioned, they stand out and they keep the title fight really close, or they win it in their first opportunities, whereas other drivers don't. But I think this one is a little different, even if he is a generational talent, just because of that, this is his second season and he's still a teenager. So I think that kind of makes things a little bit different. Just it's historically unprecedented what we're going to try and see from him this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I just looked it up just to double check so we get it right. Lewis was 22 in his rookie season, so Antonelli's 3.5 years younger right now. We saw it from Max, but Max is one of one in a lot of ways, and what we're seeing from Kimi already is extremely impressive. 3.5 years younger than Lewis was, and younger than most guys when they get in the car for their rookie year. It's already winning races. So full props to Kimi. What a weekend.
Yeah, I agree. As we're still talking about the Mercedes guys with Kimi, is there anything you wanted to take away from George this weekend? What did you see from him? And just overall, just kind of takeaways as a whole from the weekend, because he goes out, gets sprint pole, wins the sprint, has that issue in Q3, like I said, and doesn't get the pole in the main Grand Prix. Has a little bit of a tougher race than his teammate out front, but still manages to come back and finish P2. What did you take away from George this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think the qualifying, misfortune kind of, spelled the end of his weekend, because after that he ends up, mixed up with the Ferraris a lot more. Antonelli was able to get out earlier and utilize that pace, that open air pace that we talked about. The Mercedes is so good at. It's clear that Ferrari can maintain these wheel to wheel battles for a number of laps, and they can be competitive in that regard. But once Mercedes gets out about a second half ahead, it's pretty much game over. So I think with their current start predicament, and also with a rough qualifying, it just kind of unfortunately wasn't George's day. Nothing bad that I'm going to take away from this weekend as far as his prospects for the rest of the season. Just every now and then you're going to have an off weekend, and the fact that he still managed P2 in the race and P1 in the sprint, if that's your off weekend, I'll take that all every day. So yeah, nothing major to take away from George other than some misfortune this weekend.
Yeah, other than that qualifying thing, which wasn't his fault, I think his only chance was getting ahead of Kimi at the start, or having some weird thing happen where a yellow comes out at the right time for him, and he's able to hop Kimi there. Because I think that was the only way for him to come away with the win this weekend, and that just didn't pan out for him. But yeah, it's still a good weekend for him, I think, as a whole. Let's move on to the Ferraris now. That Ferrari battle, I think, is just really fun to watch so far this year. Hamilton gets his first podium with Ferrari after a year and now 2 races into the Ferrari experiment with Lewis. Do you have any takeaways from Hamilton this weekend and getting his first podium with Ferrari? Because I think it was cool to see, and a good step in the right direction, but I still think he and the team have a little bit of a ways to go to close that gap to Mercedes, although I think it is possible. To me this year, he just seems to be in a much better place. I know we talked about that preseason. He, had his annual offseason post the past few years of, this season's going to be different. I've rested in the offseason. I'm coming back a new driver. But it does seem to be a little bit different this year with the new regs, along with just, whatever he did in the offseason actually panning out this time and coming back a different driver. He seems to be in a really good place. Some of those wheel-to-wheel battles, he just felt like he was placing the car in the perfect position. And yeah, I was just really, really, happy with what I saw from Lewis this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, a couple takeaways. One, it's just cool to see him up there on the podium in Ferrari red, one of the all-time greats of the sport, and a guy who's done so much to change the sport. To see him up there on the podium, and not just on the podium again after over a year away, but in that Ferrari red is really special. I think the biggest takeaway from a driving perspective is Lewis does look better, but this is like just how close these two are right now, Hamilton and Leclerc, fighting every single, every time we've seen them in any sort of race, the sprints and the full race, these guys are just going back and forth, trading blows. And this is what I wanted to see when these two became teammates. I was so excited to see these guys battle it out, because they're two of the best drivers on the grid, and just both so much fun to watch. And last year I felt like we didn't get a lot of that. Hamilton being off the pace, just the way those cars maneuvered, and we just didn't get a lot of those two battling it out. But now we're seeing them go neck and neck every time out. Obviously, small sample size, but man, if we get more like this, even if they're fighting for P3 instead of P1, it's thrilling racing, and I've just had a blast watching Hamilton and Ferrari so far this year.
Yeah, it's been so much fun to watch these two go at it in the first two races. There was like 6 times I think in the Chinese Grand Prix where I was just like, oh, they're gonna touch, they're gonna wreck, and then they somehow didn't. And yeah, it's just been awesome to watch those two go at it. And the fact that they haven't wrecked so far is also kind of insane. They've been really close a few times. Charles getting a little bit upset with the amount of space he was given in the sprint, but then in the actual race, he comes with the rating. He's like, this battle is actually pretty fun. So I love the reply. He's like, glad to hear it or something from his engineer. But yeah, it was it's just been awesome to watch these two guys so far. They're putting on such a show, and they are really close. I feel like in pace, what we kind of expected to see last year is kind of coming into fruition now this year, and it's been so much fun. I can't wait until they're doing it for the lead instead of eventually for third when the dust settles and the Mercedes get out front. But yeah, it's been a blast to watch these two, and I think it's the best like driver battle between two teammates right now on track for sure. It's been yeah, I just can't say enough good things about how fun it's been to watch these two so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not even close as to this being the best battle. It's got to be such a gift to have these two guys on your team. If Fred came out after the race and basically said, these guys are professionals. I trust them. I'm going to let them fight, and to be able to have that, you don't have to deal with, any young guys, any hotheads, anything like that. These are two seasoned drivers who both know what they're doing. They're two of the best in the sport. It's just it makes great viewing for us, but it also, if they can put the car underneath them, these guys can compete with and beat anybody. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that gap will close some to Mercedes. I got a little hope that it'll close as the season goes on. But for right now, I'm just enjoying the show that these guys are putting on.
Yeah, it's like it's just been awesome. I don't really have anything else to say. It's what we were hoping for last year and didn't get. These regulations seem to be much better for Hamilton, and Leclerc seems to be getting on with the car pretty well as well. I think, like you said, once these two get that car underneath them to fight for wins, it's going to be awesome. And like you said as well, with Fred kind of saying these two are pros and just letting them have at it on track. I think there's been times where it's felt like maybe it would have been best for the team's overall chances of winning a race for them to not be fighting so much, whether that's to close down the gap to a Mercedes car ahead or it's to keep a Mercedes car behind, just to let them follow 1-2 in line and not lose time. But I think they know deep down that right now the car that they have, unless something crazy happens to the Mercedes and they crash out or they have mechanical issues or something, they're not quite where they need to be to win a race. So I think they're just letting their guys, they're letting them battle it out on track, and I think that's been really fun to see that Ferrari is willing to let them go there as well, and have that trust in their drivers that this isn't going to end in complete disaster, because we've seen that before too.
Yeah, I mean, I think over the course of a sprint, they have a shot, and they, should be smart about how they manage that. But like you said, I think they know over the course of a full race right now, they don't have much of a chance. So really, their best chance is to, be safe and smart, so you can hopefully take that third place in a podium. And you never know what can happen. George and Kimi, there could be, mechanical failure, any kind of thing. So you still want to be smart about it, but I think it benefits everyone to just let these guys race right now. You keep both of them happy and keep the fans happy. I think, everyone is thrilled by this, so
Yeah.
I think it's a good management by Fred. We'll see if there is an incident. We'll see how things change. But right now, I'm liking where things are going for Ferrari.
Yeah, the other big takeaway I've had from the Ferrari so far is the race starts are real, man. Like I know we talked about it a little bit after Australia. It seemed like the Mercedes were both out of battery by the time they got to the race start. So we weren't sure the Ferraris did look good off the line, but we weren't sure how it would actually compare to the Mercedes once they got that figured out. And this week as well, both race starts, the Ferraris zoom right past and are in the lead in turn one every race this year. The Ferraris have led into turn one, and everything we were promised about those Ferrari starts has come true, and it's been pretty exciting to watch that difference. Uh, we haven't really seen in like the modern era, I guess, one team have an advantage on starts compared to another. It is really interesting to watch play out of Ferrari take the lead and then the Mercedes have to fight through that to get back out front. I think that's also a reason why some of these races have been pretty good to watch, in my opinion, just from that aspect of making the Mercedes fight for it, and these Ferrari starts being a real thing has been a good thing so far.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine how boring these races would be if Mercedes had a turbocharged start right now.
Yeah,
You
see ya.
know, yeah, and it would
Yeah,
be. I mean, we get good midfield action, I guess, but yeah, at least we're getting some action at the front of the field for the first half of the races. Yeah, yeah. I think what's interesting too is that I was expecting it to carry over more to other teams,
mm,
like, I feel like on both sides it hasn't really. Like
yeah,
in Melbourne, Sainz had actually the best start of anyone in the
mhm,
field. As a Mercedes powered driver,
yeah,
Ferraris were really good too. They were up there in the top five, but it hasn't been as much of just, oh, you've got this and that engine. Ferrari have definitely found something, but
mhm,
everybody else we've seen, just up and down the field, guys have issues, guys get off to randomly good starts. It's all over the place right now, and
yeah,
everyone's still trying to figure out how to deal with these batteries and the whole 9 yards. But yeah,
yeah,
the Ferrari starts are real, and they're extremely important right now because it is allowing them to give them some barrier to the rest of the field, and also to put up at least a little fight with the Mercedes at the moment. So yeah, I'm glad it's happening because, like I said, without it, it would be a rough scene right now.
yeah. To your point, the Max starts haven't been that great, but Hadjar, I feel like all of his starts have been pretty solid. I don't remember him dropping too many spots in a start. They're in the same team, obviously the same engine. The Racing Bulls, I feel like, have had fine starts, other than when Lawson didn't move that one time. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting how it just kind of varies from car to car, and it's not really. It is an engine thing, but it's not really an engine thing. Like Behrman and the Haas has gotten pretty good starts so far, but like yeah, we can't really, I guess, judge the Cadillac starts, even though they are Ferrari powered, because a few laps later they're kind of just back and near the back of the pack. But yeah, it's really been an interesting dynamic how it's all played out with the starts, and I think it is making these races more intriguing because it kind of jumbles up the lineup from the jump.
I know, that's what I was hoping, that these Ferrari starts would get Cadillac up into the points, but it's not quite happening yet. Yeah, we're gonna need a little more juice than that, I think, to be up in the point. We need like a triple charge start. That's the Mario Kart thing that we
Yeah,
need, is the perfectly timed
yeah,
start that shoots you forward.
that
That's
should
about
be an
the only
option.
chance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think they need to look at adding that. Mario Kart's really taking over the F1 scene right now. I think that'd be a good thing to add. If you nail it, if you get it exactly right when the red light goes out, you get like 50 more horsepower off the line.
yeah, like the top three guys in reaction time or
Yeah,
something, you get an extra jolt off the line.
we're fixing F1. We're doing it right now. Let's talk more about the regulations. How are you feeling after two races in these new regs? I guess kind of two and a half if you count the sprint. Um, are you like, how do you take stock of what's happened so far? Are you feeling good about it? Are you feeling kind of? I feel like there was a lot of defeat in the fandom after the Australian Grand Prix. Just seeing the super clipping and everything not really playing out how we would have liked to have seen it. Um, but I feel like maybe that's changed in your opinion after this race. How are you feeling so far after the two?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same place I was last week that, there's still some big issues with qualifying that certainly need to get fixed. And we saw that this week. I mean, we saw it. I'm definitely, this isn't an original observation. I've seen a lot of people point this out, but the fact that they were cutting the camera every
Mhm.
time on the straight. You get halfway
Yeah.
down the straight with a car, and then they cut the camera so that way you don't see the super clipping and see the car losing speed down the straight. I mean, stuff like that's got to get worked out. I still feel strongly about that, but I also think some of the racing that we've gotten has been fantastic. At least to watch. I know it can feel gimmicky to some of the drivers, and they give better feedback than I would. But at the end of the day, as a fan, I'm not displeased with the product on Sundays. They just need to clean up the qualifying and maybe find a middle ground between the teams and what the FIA currently wants as far as the electric power and all that.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I'm kind of struggling the most right now is how to reconcile a few things in my head of yes, I do want it to be pure racing as much as possible. Um, but also we haven't really had like true pure racing in F1 for a while if you count DRS and some other things. I feel like almost every series at this point has something that makes it at least a little bit gimmicky. Um, and then on top of that, like the qualifying thing is a huge issue. The super clipping obviously has to change. Uh, like you said, can't have these cars slowing down in on a straight just to recharge the battery. That's just not going to fly. And until that changes, I think we're going to be in a place where something has to be fixed. But at the same time, like I'm not a fan of those two things. I'd rather have these cars passing purely than using the battery to do it, and I'd rather not have the super clipping and slowing on the straights. But at the same time, we're getting so much wheel to wheel action in these races. Like the first 20 laps or so of Australia was awesome. The sprint as a whole was pretty much all really good. The first like 2/3 of the race in China was fantastic. I mean, I feel like we're getting really, really good races, and some really good action, some really good moments. The more you can bring these cars wheel to wheel, the better. I think it's just gonna provide more passing, more opportunity for guys to make moves, and for the field to change. And then on top of that, you watch racing. Obviously, I think the base is you like seeing cars kind of go fast, but B, you want to see these guys be as close to each other as possible and make passes and, do the things that need to be done to move up and down the field. And so the more you can kind of make that the center of the stage, I think the better. And to an extent, these regulations have done that. It's just hard because I'm not sure they're doing it in the way that I would like to see it, and a lot of people would like to see it. Like the result, I think is what we want in a way, but the process of getting there is not how we want it to be achieved. And I think that's where F1's in a tricky place right now with these new regulations. They can kind of point to, oh, look at how many overtakes there have been in these races, and look at how close some of these battles have been, and say, look, there's nothing wrong. We don't need to change it. Look at the product. Um, but then you're driving away some of your core fans just with the base of the car and how the car is made. So it's a really tricky spot for them right now, and how they reconcile with that, how they come together and make adjustments moving forward is, I think, going to be like the biggest thing to watch in these next few months as we get more into these regulations.
Yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, there is kind of gimmicky racing in all these series. I mean, the drivers keep calling it Formula E, but at least you don't have to like take the long way around a corner to get
Yeah, exactly.
turbocharge yet, you
Yeah.
know. So there's still some boundaries there. But yeah, I mean, I like you said, we're getting great racing, great overtakes, and we're still so early in the regs, right?
Mhm.
Obviously only 2 races in. Usually these cars get closer as regs go on. We could see more battles at the front of the
Mhm.
field, midfield, there's already been a lot of battles, but we could continue to see even more teams get in the fray, as Aston Martin and Cadillac and Williams, maybe get it figured out. So yeah, I mean, like I said, as far as the race goes, I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure there are improvements that could be made, and I would be okay with, scaling back on the electric side a little bit just to, even things out a little more. But for me, I am still mostly pro the racing. They have to fix qualifying. That's it's a huge deal, and uh, you can't just punt on Saturday and hope that people tune in Sunday.
Yeah.
So yeah, that should be priority number one right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about qualifying. Is in a race you can kind of hide some of those things, right? Because you're higher on fuel, you're managing tires, you're not pushing the car to its absolute limit as much as you are in qualifying. So you can kind of hide some of those factors of the car going a little bit slower at the end of the straight or whatever, because that's just what you would see a little bit more in a race, is these cars going slower than what their absolute limit is. But in qualifying, you can't hide any of those things. And it's going to be really hard for part of what makes F1 special is I think people follow it throughout a whole weekend. You follow all the practices, the qualifying, and the race. I'm not sure other series have that to the same level as F1. And, if you take away one of those days, like you said, and you kind of just punt on Saturday, well, it's just going to create a downstream effect where maybe people don't tune in as much on Sunday because they see it, they don't like Saturday, and they just assume maybe Sunday will be the same. So, and on top of that, we want to see qualifying be as good as it can be, and it's obviously not that right now. These cars aren't being pushed to their absolute limit. The big thing for me is how do we? I'm not sure about this at all. I know we're say the Wheel Knowers podcast, but I don't know everything about how these cars and these regulations work to like a on like a scientifical engineering level, or scientific engineering level. So it's I'm not like an expert in that, but I don't know what the solution is to this, where we can keep the cars racing close and keep that passing while fixing the battery issue and the super clipping and some of the battery management stuff. I'm sure F1's looking into that. I hope they are, because I think that that's the route that they need to go. There's some positives that can be taken from these new regs. I feel like the dirty air is less of a problem. Guys are able to follow a bit closer. The cars are lighter, they're smaller. I think that's a great thing. I think that'll help with racing at a lot of these tracks. So there's good things to take away from these regulations. They're just not quite perfect yet, and I know, they're never going to be perfect, but they're still a good bit away from what they could be, and I think they could be honestly really, really great.
Yeah, and that's okay. And I know that, as a pinnacle of motorsport, you expect them to get it right immediately, you as in the fan base as a whole. But, that's not always going to happen. These are the most complex cars in the world. There's a lots to consider. And I think, as I said early on, a season preview, race one, once they make some tweaks, I think we're going to be in a good spot here. But they do have to make some tweaks and hopefully do it soon. And now they've got some time in between Japan and Miami. I don't know on that short notice if they can make the best use of that time or not. But there's some chances here for teams to adapt and develop, and for the series as well to kind of decide where they want to take this next and deliver a better product on top of what's been in some places a decent start.
Yeah, I wonder, like, do they go maybe 60-40 energy to engine? Do they go 70-30? Do they scale it to where you have a set amount of like overtake to start the race, and you can use that throughout the race as you see fit, to defend, to attack, to to just use as you see fit? I just wonder how they kind of like a push to pass thing in IndyCar type of situation. I wonder how they go about fixing this and how they manage the perception that they've put forth so far, which is, we're moving more and more towards sustainable, towards electric, with, not losing your fan base, because your fan base is pretty made it pretty clear that they're against moving more and more electric. I think that's something that they might just have to put their hand up and say, we got this wrong, and we're still going to go net zero. We're still going to do all the things that we're setting out with these environmental concerns in mind, but we're not going to lose this series and lose our fans over it either. We're gonna find a way to do both, and I think that that's the struggle that they're going to have to go through to make this work.
Yeah, I think, I've seen all kinds of stuff suggested. I think we could see 60-40 first. I wonder if 70-30 at this point is too big of an adjustment. 60-40, I think, would hopefully at least help on some tracks make things look a little better. There might be some tracks where super clipping is pretty much gone. But,
Yeah.
we still might see it at our Monzas and Vegas
Mm-hmm.
and all that, which would be really unfortunate because that's part of what makes those tracks great
Mm-hmm.
is the full speed. So we're going to see how that goes. Like you said, neither of us are technical experts, but I would guess 60-40 would be the first step, and then maybe go from there because, if they go too radically in the other direction, I wonder if that's going to be too big of a change for teams to make at this point.
Yeah, I think 60-40 would probably be a good start. And like you said, most tracks, I think that would take away the super clipping. I would hope. But I think that'd be a good start in the right direction. And then you can still, use the battery to an extent for the drivers to manage, for that to be a challenge, and for them to use to overtake and stuff. But it's not, I think step number one is the super clipping, like we said last week, getting as close to getting rid of that as possible. I think that'd be a good step in the right direction. I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, how bad is it going to look when they're rocketing down the end of the straight in like Baku or like Monza, or Vegas, like you said. Some of these tracks, I feel like it's going to be really, really bad. And yeah, I just don't think F1 wants to get to a place where they expose themselves to that. So I think they're looking to hopefully make changes quicker rather than later, and not see that. But then again, we might not see it because a big controversy from the weekend was, is F1 trying to hide the super clipping from us? Are they deliberately messing with data? Are they changing camera angles to try and not show the cars slowing on the straights, not show that telemetry? And I saw some of it was the Mercedes. It wasn't like changing at the end of the straight, and then it dropped really quick. And I think that was a telemetry issue. I think it was, concluded that was just a glitch in the telemetry. It was not F1 or F1 stakeholders trying to hide that information from the public. But I do think that them deliberately switching camera angles, I mean, you look at it and you can tell once they get to about top speed, they'll immediately switch off of a car being like a driver's POV, or that top down angle of the car with all the data spread out on the dash or on the halo. They're deliberately switching away from that. So I do think that that's a real thing. And honestly, I kind of find it funny that F1 is like, all right, switch now. Don't let them see it. Don't let them see it, because they don't want us to see it. But it's just kind of drawing more like eyes and more more just people are looking at it more than they would be if they weren't hiding it, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately the camera angle stuff is pretty case closed. I don't see it. That has to be what's going on, because I used to follow cars around for full laps, and they don't anymore, and they're always cutting at the same part. So I don't think they're messing with telemetry or anything. I think that opens them up to a lot of issues potentially,
Yeah.
with how much teams rely on the data and everything.
Yeah.
Um, and just being honest with the public about your product. But they're certainly trying to kind of move eyeballs away from it, because at the end of the day, it's no fun. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see the what's supposed to be the best engineered race cars in the world slowing down on straights, and the cars just don't even sound good when they're doing it. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't benefit them at all as a series. So, if you're a casual viewer tuning in, you probably have no idea that that's
Yeah.
going on when they're cutting cameras. And, it doesn't look any different than it did last year.
Yeah.
But, to people who are watching on boards and who were kind of tuned in during testing and everything, they know what's going on, and they know the issues. So I think, yeah, they've got a real issue with their diehard fan base there, more than the casuals. But those are the people that are paying F1 TV subscriptions and buying merch and all that. So that's kind of who you really have to market to at the end of the day.
And especially with them changing over to Apple TV in the US and not streaming races on ESPN as they were before. You know, everybody, if you're watching in the US, you have to pay for it in some way. And yeah, that's something that you can't isolate those people, because you're going to lose so much money in that process. And you can't that's one thing that we learned from the whole NASCAR saga, and I know we touched on it last week, but you have to take care of your core fans first. You can't go searching for, oh, we need to reach this extra audience and this audience that we've never touched before. You have to take care of your core fans first. And if your core fans are happy with how that's going and it is reaching new audiences, then great, do it. But you can't compromise your core fans searching for new ones, because that never ends well, and popularity just goes down instead of the goal of going up, like we saw with NASCAR. And now kind of, I hope F1 changes past quickly and fixes this, because they're going to lose that core fan base, and you can't do that and expect to survive in the same way. It's taken NASCAR a long time to get out of that. Now they're slowly getting back to where they were, and I don't want to see the same thing happen to F1 when there's a case study in the same in the world of motorsports already for F1 to look at and go, that's what we shouldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, the move to Apple TV at the end of the day, like that makes it a lot harder for people to get tuned in. We saw that with MLS had a huge decline in viewership, going from ESPN to Apple, just as F1 did. It's going to be a lot harder to bring in casual fans that way. So, when you get them there, you have to deliver the best product you've got. And at the moment, they're like I said, I'm enjoying some of the racing stuff. I don't want to sound like I'm contradicting myself too much, but there is some stuff that they got to clean up. The qualifying, just watching these cars on the onboard, it's no fun. So, you get that fixed up, and then I think you got a good product to sell, because you can show all these overtakes, you can show some good battles, and maybe get people in. But they've certainly got some stuff to clean up first.
Yeah, no, I agree. The product and the fans, the core fans, always have to come first. And I hope F1, goes down that route instead of continuing to go to new audiences that are going to drive away their core fan base. I think that's the key of what we're learning so far this year in F1. Let's move on to the midfield battle and our Oliver, as they call him now. I picked up on that this week. I realized after you said that last week, I was like, no one on the broadcast is calling him Ollie anymore. They're all calling him Oliver. We call him the Bear Man here. He continues to shine with a P5 finish in China. Just an excellent start to his season as well. He's fifth in the point standings. I know it's 2 races and a sprint, but Bearman in a second season in the Haas is fifth in the point standings, ahead of Max Verstappen. It's been an incredible start to the season for him. The Bear Man is just he's off. He's hunting in the woods right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about this guy. He's been phenomenal this year. Uh, he comes in. First of all, he does well in the sprint. Snags a point for Haas there, looks competitive, and then in the race, he qualifies 10th, but then he gets into this little kerfuffle with Hadjar at the start. It goes a little deep. They don't make contact, but Hadjar spins, and that forces Behrman around. He falls down to P13. I mean, he's even behind Alonso at that point. Sandwiched between Alonso and Bottas, and not where you want to be right now.
No.
But he fights and claws his way all the way up to P5. I mean, even if you count the McLarens didn't start and Red Bull had their issues and stuff, he's still the top midfield car, 2 weeks in a row. And that's really saying something. I mean, the guy's got the goods. He's up 17-0 on Esti Bestie right now. And, I got to say that our predictions from the preseason, is too early to take a victory lap, but we're off to a great start with the Behrman versus Esteban predictions there. 17-0 is pretty cut and dry, even if it's only 2 races in a sprint.
Yeah, I like what you did there. The Bearman fighting and clawing his way back to a P5. I'm not sure that was on purpose, but I like what you did there. He's been phenomenal, and like you said, we called the Ocon thing from the beginning. We knew it. Poor Esti Bestie. It's not looking good. He was actually I know he was on a different strategy, but there was a little bit of the race where he was up there fighting for decent positions and points, and then it all kind of just went to the wayside, and he ended up finishing between the Cadillacs, which, as you mentioned earlier, not where you want to be right now. When especially when your teammate finishes P5. So yeah, it's the gap is pretty wide at the moment, and who knows if that'll play out for the whole season. But Oliver, the Bearman, whatever you want to call him, is off to a hot start, and poor Esti Bestie is getting left in the dust right now.
Yeah, Andy punted Colapinto and then had his comments filled by thousands of Argentinian fans. I think that might be a new strategy for us to try and increase our listenership, is to just start talking bad about Colapinto, and then we'll get thousands of people rushing to the comments.
Should we every video is just crapping on Colapinto?
Maybe, but I would kind of fear for our safety at that point. But
yeah, I know.
Anything for some extra listeners, I guess.
We're gonna steer clear of Colapinto. I think is best strategy.
No, Colapinto had a good weekend this weekend, anyways.
Did.
So yeah.
Shout out Colapinto.
Yeah. And
maybe we'll go the opposite way and just become the biggest Colapinto lovers.
Yeah. You're home for Cadillac and Colapinto. Really, really picking winners here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, honestly, just back to the Ocon stuff. I mean, that incident with Colapinto, it was neither of their best work, really. Respect to Esteban for hopping on the radio and saying that was my fault. That's something that you never ever see from an F1 driver. So, seriously, respect for that. But that was just one of those where Colapinto got wiggly coming out of the pits, and Ocon tries to make a move. You see the car getting wiggly in front of you. You have the pace advantage. Let me make a move, which I understand, but there was just no room there at all. There was no way that was ending other than both cars spinning. So that was just kind of an all around disaster there.
Yeah, that it was not good. It was, like you said, not either of their finest moments. It was I think Ocon just saw a gap and he was like, send it, and did not work out the way he was anticipating. I don't know if he maybe didn't know Colapinto was like, I assume he had to. I'm pretty sure he saw Colapinto come out of the pits, so he knew he was on cold tires, and he wasn't necessarily going to be where he was intending to go based off of that. But and then you also see on the onboard Ocon, he gets onto the grass and gets squirrely as well and hits Colapinto there. So yeah, it was pretty obviously his fault. And like you said, you never hear a driver just say, "Yeah, that one's on me," and he did. So props to him, I guess. But when I heard that, I was like, "Are you sure you want to say that?" Like, I mean, yes, it was on you, but are you sure you want to say that right now? But yeah, it's kind of just it's a broader Alpine versus Haas fight for P5 right now in the constructors, which is insane. Although Red Bull and McLaren aren't off to the hottest starts either. Maybe they're fighting for P3 in the constructors. Who knows? We're with the reliability stuff right now. I mean, it's getting a little out of hand with the constructors championship, but yeah, that's our main fight for the midfield is Haas and Alpine, which you were high on Alpine in the offseason. And Haas looked good in testing, but so maybe we should have seen it coming, but still a little bit surprising to me that those two are the ones battling it out for that P5 spot.
Yeah, I mean, Haas fourth in the constructors and 1 point off McLaren for third. I mean, what a world we live in. And Behrman P5 in the drivers' championship was just ahead of last year's champion, ahead of Verstappen, 4-time champion. We'll give Alonso a pass with his current situation, but yeah just I mean, what a blinder of a start for Behrman. And I gotta say, the one great thing about this Haas Alpine battle is that we continue the eternal war between Ocon and Gasly that just never ends.
Yes.
I mean, they finished this race 8 positions apart, and they still had some midfield battles. They can't find their way away from each other. So, yeah, I mean, this is a very entertaining quartet of drivers. I will say, if these two teams are battling it out all year, anything could happen any given Sunday, as they say in football.
That is true. I kind of like this group of 4 here that we have. You got Gasly, kind of like the kid, and then Behrman, like maybe the kid 2.0. We're not sure yet. It just, both of those guys, you don't really know what you're getting. Colapinto is, you really don't know what you're getting. And Esti Besti, who's got his main rival in life that he's fighting against in Pierre Gasly. So it's kind of, it's a group of 4 that you don't know what's going to happen. That's great stuff.
Yeah. Not to mention our boy Lawson had a massive weekend this weekend too. So you throw him in there.
Yeah, you get the Racing Bulls in there, and we're in for a heck of a field fight.
Yeah, Lindblad and Lawson. Yeah. I mean, that's fireworks right there.
Yeah, cue the Liam Lawson music. It's about to get electric. Yeah, the other thing from the midfield, Williams actually grabbed points. Carlos Sainz with a P9 finish. Was not expecting that, to be honest. They didn't look like they were on it with pace, but you get enough guys to drop out, and some points opportunities open up there. I was like, once I don't know who the last guy to drop out of the race was. I forget at the moment, but once they did, I was like, oh man, we're 3 retirements away from Cadillac points right now. And I know that would have been like stupid to say last year, like, oh, 3 retirements away. Yeah. But you never know. Like it could have happened. I mean, A, from like 2 guys wrecking each other out, or B, just from reliability stuff. I was praying some guys would bow out at the end of the race and we get Bottas points, but didn't happen in the end.
Yeah, I mean, 2 out of the top 4 teams, couldn't really keep their cars on track this weekend. So anything was possible. But yeah, I mean, at least it's something on the board for Williams. Just get a couple points up there, to kind of hang their hat on for now. They've still got a lot of work to do. It's not something to write home about, in the sense of, this really feels like a missed opportunity for them. Not this specifically, Sainz did well to be P9, but just this broader season, you look at the issues that Red Bull and McLaren are having, and there's so many chances to fight for good points right now for these midfield teams. And, if Williams And to be fair, Aston Martin too, if they were what we expected them to be, even just top of midfield, not even your, winning
Mhm.
races, this could be a totally different season. And
Yeah.
instead, Williams are scavenging to get 2 points. So,
Mhm.
I mean, the pace really was not that great, especially in qualifying. Uh, you know, was not anything to write home about. You know,
Mhm.
but hey, points are points, and
Yeah.
I guess you'll take it at the end of the day.
Yeah, you'll take them when you can get them. That's more what I was saying with the Haas and Alpine thing of me being surprised that those were the two. A year ago, I would have been put all my cards in on it's Williams and Aston Martin who are going to be the ones fighting for that P5 battle. If there's a battle for the P5, it's going to be those two, and it just for many reasons it has not panned out that way. So yeah, that's our midfield update there. Haas, I feel like taking the early lead, and you got to get the points when you can get them, especially early on before some reliability gets figured out and maybe some changes to the regs or whatever. You got to really maximize those points when you can, and I think Haas and Alpine are doing that so far this year. And Racing Bulls to an extent, they've had a little bit more reliability trouble, but they've gotten some pretty good points out of this year as well so far.
Yeah, I gotta say too, that's just so crazy in hindsight, to have
Mhm.
Newey and Alonso on one team, and then you've got the Sainz Albon pairing with
Mhm.
Vowles and everything that Williams has done. Those are the teams that are struggling right now, and you've got Haas who have always had limitations to what they can do in F1, resource limitations, doing so well, and then
Mhm.
Alpine, with Colapinto on the hot seat, and Briatore always brings a certain energy to these teams. They're both those teams. I think pre-testing, I could have seen, being way off the pace this year,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden they're the standard for the midfield. So props to both of them, and we'll see if they can keep it up. But I think as more and more races go by, if they can keep going, I'm just really start believing.
Yeah, who's not the top of the midfield right now? Aston Martin. They continue to struggle, still unable to finish a race, 2 races in. Did they finish the sprint? I'm forgetting if they finished the sprint, but
I'm
I
pretty sure that they did. Yeah, they both cars finished the
okay,
sprint,
so they
but
finished the sprint.
they only finished ahead of Perez, so
Okay.
out of finishers, yeah.
This yeah, okay. So, I mean, they did finish, so that's good. Um, but yeah, they're unable to finish a full Grand Prix as of yet. Stroll goes out early on. The thing that I want to get to though is Fernando Alonso. He's driving on the back straight a little later on in the race, and he's having to take his hands off the wheel. He's driving an F1 car at like around 200 miles an hour almost with no hands on the wheel. This man is just, and he knows he's not going to finish the race. He knows that the permanent nerve damage is going to come before he can finish the race. And yet he's still out there driving around like a complete madman. It's insane. He's he's a Waka Flocka, no hands right now. It's incredible. I just absolutely insane stuff from Alonso.
Yeah, I man, I can't imagine what's going through his mind right now. Signing up at his age to come back and do this. Uh, I mean, you're 44 years old, you're a multi-time champion, one of the best drivers really of all time, and you end up in this car. I mean, you can barely complete laps without your fingers like going into some sort of shock. I at one point I saw him get passed by a Cadillac, I believe, one of the Cadillacs, and like wave to the car
I
as it
saw
passed
that.
him by. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine like what's going through his head at
Yeah.
the moment. It's I mean, I'm pretty much speechless. It's the first time, uh, that he's been below 20th in the championship since 2001, which I know that some seasons,
Yeah.
I guess that technically wasn't possible to be below P20, but
Well,
I mean,
most of these seasons, I feel like we've had a reserve driver at some point fill in. So I
no,
guess
you're
it is
right.
possible.
You're
But
right. That's a good point. But yeah, I mean, that just shows where we're at. I mean, that's literally 25 years since it's been this bad for Alonso.
I feel bad. I shouldn't be laughing. I feel bad for him, but it's like it's so outrageous that you just have to kind of laugh it off at this point because like we were just talking about, if it wasn't even higher than P5, I was expecting Aston Martin to at least be battling for P5 this year, and they're just they can't even finish a race. It's that bad.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the bare minimum,
Yeah.
It was clear that there was, like, a little bit going on behind the scenes there, like, with Newey kind of parachuting in as
Mhm.
team principal,
Yeah.
that wasn't a great sign, but,
Mhm.
you still think, "Alright, well, maybe they're not gonna win the title," but, yeah, they be 5th, top of the midfield, whatever, and, they can't even do a full race distance. So I wonder what their break is going to look like with this new extended break between Japan and Miami, kind of
Mhm.
what they can figure out in that time. I don't expect them to come back and be on the podium or anything, or even
Yeah.
in the points, but like, can they figure out a way to, finish races and finish them in respectable time?
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, really, Alonso was only a second and a half off of Albon in the sprint.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not saying they have pace by any stretch, but like if
But they
you know
have they're
if you
not embarrassing pace when they're
yeah
out there.
if you
Like
c-
it's
if
embarrassing for what expected.
mhm.
Sorry, but it's embarrassing for what it was expected to be, but it's not embarrassing in the sense of like they're 5 seconds behind.
Yeah, I mean that's basically where I was going with it. So it's that's really obviously they've got major pace issues, but at the end of the day, step one, you just got to finish the race. So uh, yeah, we'll see what that month plus. I'd love to be in those meetings. Find a way to sneak into some Zoom calls or something and see what's going on because I just can't imagine it's going well at the factory there.
You get the Zoom access link. That'd be great to listen in on. If anyone is listening and they work at Aston Martin and you want to share that with us, we won't say anything from the meeting, but we will sit in on it if you'd have us.
Yeah, I'm just gonna like start guessing passwords to Newey's email or something, and honestly, it'd probably be easier to get into the Honda guys'
Yeah.
emails. Given what we've seen from them, recently. So
Newey at AstonMartin.com.
yeah, a Newey at
Hey,
Aston
Newey.
Martin.
Um, let's move on to Cadillac Corner here. Discuss our bros, and of course, Bottas just absolutely stunting all over Aston Martin, finishing P13. Just, I mean, an incredible race from him. The parades were being thrown in the streets here around my house. People were so excited. It was crazy stuff. I almost broke down in tears on the carpet in my living room. Just, I was so happy, so thrilled. Um, but I mean, it is good. Like, we're moving in the right direction. I feel like, I mean, yes, there was about 6 cars, 7 cars that retired from the race with mechanical problems, but we didn't. I mean, McLaren couldn't even start the race. We didn't even start the race. We finished the race. So take that, McLaren. You take your constructors championships, and pee off. We're finishing races. You're not.
Yeah, I mean, it really, other than Perez nearly punting Bottas out of the race on lap one, I
Yeah,
think
that
this
was
was,
tough.
I think this was a highly successful weekend for Cadillac just to have two cars finish the race. Uh, we talked last week about no moral victories once you get to a certain point, but I mean, they weren't, I guess better than last week. Like they uh, Bottas finished ahead of a car that ran the whole race, so that's something. Another thorn in the cap for Esty Bestie. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm taking away positives for
Think about
America's team
this.
here.
We beat a car straight up that is P4 in the constructors right now.
It's true.
Just think about that.
Yeah, that's a transitive P3. That's what we say. That's what we say at college football fans. That's
Is
how
that
we
a
do it.
UCF championship?
Yeah, we beat that team, so we're obviously better than them.
Obviously,
Yeah,
obviously. Oh,
but
it's. I mean, I am like, I feel like I know this is probably bad to say, but just like looking at the time difference from it was it Lindblad and P12 to Botas and P13. It felt like we were like Cadillac was probably a second a lap off the race pace, which honestly, I mean, I know that's a lot, but I feel like it's a little bit of an improvement from the week prior, and I do feel like it's a step in the right direction. It's not completely embarrassing, and I just think that's like that's a low threshold, but that's like the threshold we're trying to meet right now is not completely embarrassing, and I think that they're actually doing like a decent job of that so far. And you know, you said no moral victories until a certain point. I don't think we've hit that point yet, so I'm still taking the moral victories, and I'm gonna ride that out as long as I can. But until like I mean, we said this last week, but if they're not better by significantly better by Abu Dhabi, then I'll be concerned. But right now, I'm only seeing relative positives at this point for Cadillac.
no, I mean this was the next step, and I really do think that they took a step forward this week as far as pace.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, like yeah, a second is a lot of time to gain back, but they were much worse than that last week.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm feeling good about where Cadillac is right now. A lot of room to grow, and two drivers that I think are going to give them the opportunity to do so. So P13, not totally embarrassing. We'll fly the banner for now, uh, and look forward to Suzuka.
I think I'm gonna put a P13 Botas banner right behind me until further notice, until we better that achievement. Just have whatever the highest finish we've had banner behind me
Mhm.
until we get into the points, and then we'll throw a huge celebration. But the other thing for Cadillac is um they're I am not sure like the whole breakdown of data where they're bad and where they're at least gaining a little bit, but I did see they were one of like the top five Botas was cars in terms of top speed on the straight. um so I think that is a plus. There's at least some speed there that they can maybe use when they get close enough to other cars later this year when it matters to overtake. So I feel like the corners are probably where they're losing a lot of time, and I feel like that they can. I feel like since they have the Ferrari engine, which seems like a fine engine and is at least somewhat reliable, they can use that to their advantage, get a lot of track time, and just make the changes to the car that they need this year. The thing about being so far behind is there's so much room to improve, and I think that they will actually use that, and make the improvements throughout the year that are needed to get just a little bit closer and closer until the end of the year. Hopefully they're battling for maybe French points here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking for the race pace, some of the race pace graphics, and I found them. Botas is only about 1 second off of Sainz, per
Yeah.
lap. So
Okay.
as an average, he's only 2 seconds off Verstappen. So we're, yeah, inching closer and
Closer
closer
and
to
closer.
Max.
Yep. Closer and closer. Max, we're coming. Speaking of tough weekends, that was a tough weekend for Max as well. Um, Real quick before we get to our personal podiums and stinker of the week, uh, Formula One did cancel both the Bahrain and Saudi races earlier this week for um, in the future, later in March and April. I think both of those were actually in April. But anyways, both of those have been canceled, and not anything that I've heard in terms of replacing them or moving them at this point. So it seems like the the championship may just be down to 22 races. And I think it was the right decision by Formula One to do it. I hate that they had to do it, but that's the situation we're in. So yeah, I think it was the right call to cancel those, and hopefully, we can get that resolved and be back in that area, in that region later in the year to wrap up the season.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I did think it was interesting that in the statement it just said will not take place in April. And
Yeah.
they did say it as a cancellation, but they said will not take place in April. So I think
Mm-hmm.
there might be room later in the calendar uh, for them, at least one of those races to swap back in. Obviously, more important things than racing going on, but it is unfortunate for the fans, now to have over a month with no racing
Yeah.
and, to go from Japan to Miami. You miss out on a couple interesting tracks and also,
Mm-hmm.
maybe lose some momentum if you build any at the start of the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's unfortunate. We'll see if they're able to reschedule. But if not, yeah, it does give some interesting. It's an interesting period maybe for teams to develop, and we'll see kind of how that affects the season going forward.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna play a big factor in how the rest of the season plays out too, because as we get closer, it takes away two races where I think Mercedes might have that advantage as well, and can extend that point advantage over Ferrari before the engines are kind of more equal than they are right now. So I think that's a factor as well that we'll see play out as the season goes on. Uh, let's get to our personal podiums now. I'll let you go first here. Who do you have for your personal podium? Do you want to go P3 to P1 or P1 to P3?
We can just go to P1 to P3.
Okay.
You want to go back and forth, or you want to?
Yeah, that's fine. You can go
Okay,
first.
let's do it. P1, Kimi Antonelli.
Yeah.
Couldn't really go anywhere different. Race win number one. I mean, we'll get to. There are a lot of drivers in contention for a personal podium this week.
Mhm.
So it was. If this was win number 10 or 20 or something, maybe I switched around a little bit, but win number one under a lot of pressure came in, did exactly what he needed to put together a great race. So that's our guy Kimi, P1 for this week.
I'll just say ditto to all that. We already talked about Kimi at the top. I don't really have too much else to say other than he's really impressive to watch, and just really happy for him. And like we said at the beginning, it was good to see that kind of outpouring of emotion that he had post race. And yeah, I just really enjoyed seeing him get the win this week. So yeah, that's all I got for Kimi. Really deserving P1 on the personal podium.
Yeah. I'm gonna go now to P2, and I've got Ollie Behrman sitting in my P2 spot. I mean, we already talked a little bit about him earlier, so won't belabor it too much. But this guy has truly maximized everything so far through two races in the sprint this year. The fact that he's sitting at P5, he's ahead of every driver outside of Mercedes and Ferrari. I mean, that just shows you what a fantastic season the guy's had, and I'm looking forward to seeing how high he can take this, because he's just been a phenomenal so far. Fought through some adversity in this race and still managed to come out with a P5. Just an excellent result for Oliver.
Yeah. I like that. I'm going to go Carlos Sainz for my P2. Just managing to get that Williams into the points. It didn't seem like it was anywhere close really at the start of the weekend, even to getting in points. I know a lot of that had to do with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys in front of him who did not finish the race. But still managed to get it in the points. There were other guys there that could have taken that. Hulkenberg could have taken it. Lindblad, Ocon, maybe the Cadillacs, could have taken that from him. And they didn't. So, yeah, managed to get some solid points for Williams when we were not expecting them to.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good shout. He was one of those guys. He actually was just off my personal podium, but he was one of those guys right there in contention. So, no complaints about that one. My P3 is our guy Liam Lawson for coming in, getting points both in the sprint. In the sprint, he was the best midfield driver in terms of finishing result, and then he comes into the GP. He starts all the way back in 14th. Granted, it was 12th with no McLarens, but didn't have the best qualifying. Racing Bulls just didn't really have the qualifying pace, and then to work his way all the way up to a P7. Just a really, really solid weekend for Lawson. Obviously, last weekend being so good for Lindblad automatically put some pressure right back on Lawson, and he stepped up and delivered this weekend. 8 points is a really nice haul for him. So, yeah, a big weekend for Lawson, a guy that we talked about as being under some pressure, really stepping up and delivering in a big moment.
Yeah, I was gonna say Lawson really needed a good weekend here with how good Lindblad got off the boat last weekend, and just really got after it. And Lawson, yeah, he has to outscore Lindblad this year to have his career continue essentially. So he needed a big weekend here, and he got it. I think that's a good call. In my P3, I'll go Pierre Gasly. Think it was a really solid race from him. P6 gets some more points, 2 points finishes in a row to start the season. Yeah, I think listeners of this here podcast will know we're Gasly stands. We're Gasly advocates. And I think this weekend was just another really solid showing from him. We were hoping Alpine would give him a decent car to do a little bit with this season, and I think so far they've kind of delivered on that. And it's not a car that's like near a podium yet, but it is a car that's able to allow him to fight with some guys and score some decent points. And I think Gasly's going to take advantage of that a good amount this year.
Yeah, that's a great shout. He was a guy, I think, honestly, he was probably fourth for me. He was sitting right there, P6. It's just a fantastic weekend. Like you said, we gush over the guy all the time. So, it won't go on too long, but, it's nice to see him get some good machinery this year in a car that he can consistently put into points, especially with all the troubles around him right now. So, yeah a great weekend for Gasly, and thrilled to see him up there.
All right, let's close out here with Stinker of the Week. Sam, who do you have down in the lowly dungeons of Stinker of the Week?
Well, I mean, I already see yours in the doc here, and it was going to be the same one for me. So, it's the boys in Papaya.
Your boys.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I'm wearing my old Danny Rick jersey today. Scuderia McLaren, just not their weekend at all. Double DNS, not even DNF.
Yeah.
Yeah. Poor Oscar, especially. I mean, Lando, sucks for him too. We saw some pace out of him, especially, he comes podium in Australia, and then P4 in the sprint, looked like a guy that could have been competitive, and just like that, gets knocked out. And Oscar just can't do a full race distance, I guess, this year.
I was going to ask if Oscar's the first guy to complete 2 full Grand Prix and have 3 points without running a lap in any Grand Prix.
I mean, I would imagine so. I can't imagine somebody have a double DNS but still have points.
Yeah,
I know it's because of the sprint, but the sprints haven't lasted that long. So
yeah,
gotta be
one of one.
Mm-hmm.
They're just breaking records down there at McLaren.
That's it. I can just imagine Piastri in the off season was like, man, this is gonna be my big comeback year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be, it's the revenge tour or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he comes out and can't even start the car. Well, I mean, he did start the car kind of in Australia, but he can't line up on the starting grid 2 races in a row. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah. I mean, maybe they'll make it 3 for 3 in Japan. I hope not. I hope not for his sake, but it's not been a good start right now. I yeah, it's got to be tough for him like you said. I mean, they probably knew in testing that they weren't the fastest car at the moment. But I think Piastri after last year and how it ended would have been really determined to get out and show what he's got, and he just threw a little bit of himself and some not. He just hasn't gotten the opportunity yet to really showcase that.
Yeah, it's not the ideal racing triple crown, but McLaren will go for it anyways in Japan.
Oh man. Well, it was a pretty eventful week, I'd say. Chinese Grand Prix. A lot to break down, a lot to discuss. Another new winner added to the list of all-time Formula One Grand Prix winners with Antonelli. That's always a fun thing when you get a new name to add it to that list. And yeah, that's really all we got from the Chinese Grand Prix. Sam, you got anything else you want to add before we end it here?
No, I mean, like you said, for all the ups and downs, it was a pretty wild weekend, and I'm excited to see what Japan looks like if some of these teams can fix their issues, or if we're going to end up with more reliability chaos. I think there could be some more ups and downs there before we kind of settle with this new spring break that we're going to have. So, yeah, I can't wait for Suzuka. I'm hoping it delivers a little bit better than it did last year.
Yeah, me too. George, speaking of spring break, I feel like George has got to be really excited now. These two races have been called off. He can take a little spring break trip. I just imagine George would love a good spring break vibe. I don't know why. Just get him on a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean and just let him do his thing. Spring break.
Yeah, I could see it. He's a big Mediterranean guy, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Gotta get some pictures for the gram ASAP.
That's his thing.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Spring break seems like it'd be perfect for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's everything for this week. We'll be back in a couple weeks to break down everything from Japan. Should be an exciting race there, I hope. Whether you're loving the regs or not, it's hasn't been a shortage of things to talk about through two races. So sure, Japan won't be any different. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.